Our story begins in a fantasy world. A boy hides from a group of hungry goblins. Unfortunately, he gets careless, makes a noise, and the goblins realize he's there. They immediately start chasing him. However, this was all part of the boy's plan, as he leads them into a trap. After getting rid of them, he reveals that he is traveling in another world. Let's rewind a couple of days before the boy was transported. As usual, he was alone in his classroom, reading, admitting that even in his old life, it had always been this way. It was by his own choice, as he preferred reading over getting distracted. In his class, there were different groups: the delinquents, the popular girls, the athletes, the clueless, and of course, the otakus. There were also the neat girls, the class representatives, and a few stragglers, but beyond all of them was our protagonist, someone who didn't belong to any group. Suddenly, everything started. A glow lit up all the kids. The protagonist saw the magic circle and got excited because it reminded him of his light novels. However, he soon realized that traveling to an isekai would be a hassle, so he decided to stick with his books and leave the classroom, wondering why no one else had done the same. Unfortunately, the door was sealed. He did everything he could to open it, but failed, trying again and again. Eventually, the inevitable happened. The kids started disappearing. Seeing the situation, the only escape he had was the ceiling, so he opened the vent, but it wasn't enough. The magic circle chased him and took him away. The boy found himself in a mythical white room. He began searching for the manager, the king, or the princess, but instead found an old man. The old man rushed towards him and explained that everyone else had already left, and that he needed to prepare to go too. It turned out that the old man was a god. Realizing that there was no one else left, the boy chuckled a bit, as even the omniscient couldn't foresee his escape route. The old man, a little hysterical, hurried him to prepare. The boy needed to set his stats. Normally, everyone has 50 points to distribute among various skills, but since it was the first time the old man had gathered so many people, there were only 43 in total. The best skills had already been handed out on a first-come, first-served basis, and what was left was rubbish. Still, better than nothing, the boy thought, and decided to take a look. The remaining skills were a complete mess, like having nothing at all. Annoyed, he asked the old man if he was joking because with those skills, he would never make it to the first city. The old man, tired of his complaints, gave him all the remaining skills, and so the boy automatically absorbed all the junk skills. His adventure in this new world began in nightmare mode. Once in the new world, he wondered what the hell he would do. Soon, he found his villager gear, which included an amazing bag that could hold infinite items. Not so bad for now. The boy decided to change his clothes and was now in style. Then he checked his stats. He rolled some dice and MM appeared, which turned out to be masochism points. His interface asked where he wanted to assign them, and the boy decided to put them into luck, betting it all on luck. In the end, his stats were calculated, and his luck was maxed out, but everything else was still trash. However, there was something extra, a skill granted only to loners. This skill allowed him to subjugate others, which wasn't so bad, but he understood that his adventure in this isekai would be solitary. Goodbye to his fantasy of having a harem. Soon, something felt off. He remembered being absorbed along with his classmates, but he couldn't see anyone. He didn't pay much attention to it since he couldn't form a party anyway. His priority would be to find a safe place, so he set off. After that, he would look for food, and over time, build a new home. The boy moved through the dark forest, seeing nothing and feeling a bit scared, wondering if he could face any monsters. Then he remembered that he had contact lenses, put them on, and suddenly, he could see hidden objects. Those contact lenses granted him the detection ability. Thanks to this new skill, he discovered a bunch of things, the most important being some edible mushrooms. Knowing that his bag was infinite, he stored everything he wanted. Cheerful and content, he continued exploring until he found a river. After hydrating, he headed to a cave. He advanced cautiously, hoping it wasn't the home of some monster. Upon entering, he really liked the place. Knowing he had a camping set in his bag, he decided to settle in. With a bit of his temperature magic, he managed to light a campfire and thought that, in the end, his skills weren't so bad. Suddenly, he began to feel sleepy, but before going to sleep, he wanted to check his stats. When he opened his interface, he realized that several of his skills had leveled up. He could now cast fireballs, had clairvoyance, perception, and enemy detection. Finally, he couldn't keep his eyes open and fell asleep. The next morning, the boy woke up very happy because he was still alive, and his items had additional monster repellent, all thanks to his shut-in title. He used his infinite bag took out a frying pan, knife, and meat, mixed the ingredients, and got ready to have breakfast. As he did so, he thought that this Aldean starter set was completely subtle. He wondered who this Aldean was, but he didn't dwell on it and decided to leave the cave. His goal was to look for more food, while also working on his safety. Suddenly, his detection activated. There were monsters lurking nearby, goblins. Although they should be easy prey, the boy noticed with his appraisal skill that they had very high stats, at least for him. He knew he would have to fight at some point, and what better time than now? Although his only weapon was a stick, he tried to make a small combo and managed to imbue it with magic. With this new power, he charged into battle. The fight was tough and frantic. However, he quickly learned to deal with the goblins' movements and was able to get rid of them. He survived his first battle. It wasn't perfect, but it was fine, and he felt happy to be alive. Upon returning to his cave, he decided to take one of the goblins' clubs, although for now he preferred to stick with his stick. When he checked his stats, he realized he had leveled up to level 2, and he was very happy about it. By the next day, he was sick of mushrooms and wanted meat. However, his mind conjured up the image of a girl, the class representative, and he was sure she would scold him for complaining about food. So he decided to eat everything and get to work on his defense, using his new skill, magical rapping, which enhanced all his physical and magical abilities. It was his best skill so far. He noticed that his appraisal skill had also leveled up, but for now he didn't know what it exactly did. A question mark just appeared over some things. He would figure it out later. He decided to go out and have some fun. The first thing he found was more mushrooms, but since he was tired of them, he desperately began searching for meat. He focused, remembering that the intention was to practice his magic. He used his magical rapping and ran out, feeling very light and fast. Confident in his new abilities, he decided to attack another group of goblins. This time, he defeated them effortlessly and felt so confident that he thought he could take on 3 at once. Just then, his wish came true. He quickly regretted it and hid. For now, he would let the goblins go and return to his cave to practice magic. From that moment on, he hunted goblins in the mornings and practiced magic at night. By the 5th day, he could defeat goblins with a single blow and had even decorated his base. He thought he had gotten the hang of this game, and all that was left was to keep up the pace. One night, he found what he had been looking for, delicious meat. He pounced on a rabbit and caught it, but while celebrating, he detected other characters. This time, they weren't goblins, but a group of delinquents. He didn't intend to even greet them, but he thought he might find someone else. He decided to use clairvoyance and discovered a group of boys ahead, the athletes and the geeks. He remembered having talked to the geeks a few times, but he didn't want to run into them either. He turned again and found the representatives group. That group interested him, as he knew the world he was in was ruthless, and the best way to survive was to stick together. Plus, he knew the representatives since elementary school. He thought for a moment that maybe he should approach them, but soon dismissed the idea, enjoying the freedom of being alone and having no one telling him what to do. He couldn't think of a better life than this, so he decided that from now on, he would dominate the world on his own. The protagonist is determined to conquer the world alone without involving his former classmates. Just then, his danger sense kicks in, and he notices the classmates who used to bully him in his past life. Quickly, he runs to hide behind some bushes, but one of them hears him, prompting the group to start looking around. Just as they're about to find him, a rabbit, the one the protagonist had captured earlier, jumps out from the bushes. The bullies think that's what they heard and move on. The protagonist follows them to the river, not wanting trouble but curious about what they're planning. He hides behind a tree and listens. However, they're just talking about the vice president of the club's breasts and the legs of the swim team girls. The protagonist realizes they're just hormone-driven teenagers and feels relieved knowing the class representative, who's looked out for everyone since elementary school, is keeping the girls safe. Suddenly, one of the bullies grabs a weak-looking boy named Tanaka and asks if his ability lets them do whatever they want. Tanaka confirms it does. The protagonist knows the bullies are using him like a personal Google search engine. The bullies then get up and leave, mentioning that the vice representative is waiting for them. The protagonist realizes the whole class must be in chaos and feels validated in continuing his journey alone. He heads back to his camp and discovers his solitary level has increased by 1 point. He assumes it's because he successfully avoided his classmates. Then he begins to ponder some of his other skills, like Master of Nothing and Wooden Puppet. He figures Master of Nothing allows him to multitask, even if he can't focus on just one thing, while Wooden Puppet probably makes him a puppet, his worst skill by far. Putting these thoughts aside, he eats dinner, once again lamenting the lack of meat, wishing he at least had some fish. That night, the protagonist struggles to sleep, disturbed by the sound of fighting outside. Assuming it's his classmates messing around, he goes to check. only to find a group of geeks battling goblins. The protagonist mocks their clumsy skills and wonders if he should intervene. However, his vision reveals that these geeks have better classes than his and are at a decent level. He realizes it's because they don't have to carry someone like him and have had the chance to acquire useful items. He recalls how his class was filled with athletes, idle children, and famous people, and he always questioned why someone like him was there. Now he understands that the geeks are experts in isekai worlds, so they're better off. Suddenly, his danger sense activates again, and he notices two goblins sneaking up on the geeks. Knowing they'll be ambushed, the protagonist jumps in and knocks out the goblins with his stick. The geeks defeat the rest and are surprised to see their former classmate. They thank him for his help, and the protagonist leads them back to his cave, now furnished with a door, more space, and even some basic furniture. His classmates are amazed by his setup. The protagonist humbly explains that it's thanks to a little earth magic that he was able to tidy things up. Curious, he asks what they were doing wandering around at night. Embarrassed, the geeks admit they were fleeing the class. They explain that when they first arrived in the new world, most of the class fell into despair, crying and panicking in the face of the unknown. Only they, the isekai experts, kept calm and immediately analyzed their abilities, but the bullies began threatening them to spill everything they knew about the world. The class representative tried to restore order, asking for silence to avoid attracting unwanted attention. But then goblins attacked, and the representative froze in fear. While the girls and bullies screamed, the geeks took charge, knowing goblins were easy prey. Once the situation was under control, the athletes stepped in to help. After the battle, the representative moved everyone to a more visible area to avoid further ambushes, and the geeks helped set up camp. Things were going well until the boys started complaining about their assigned tasks, refusing to work, and everything fell apart. From that point on, only the representative, the geeks, and a few other students continued to work, while the rest lazed around. The geeks also took responsibility for fighting off goblins. What concerned the geeks most was that several of the bullies had chosen abilities like Enchanter and Puppeteer, which could control others. The geeks began leveling up as fast as possible, preparing to face them if necessary. But they weren't the only ones thinking that way. The bullies started training too, knowing they couldn't use their powers until they reached a high enough level to dominate everyone. The geeks kept an eye on them, aware of their plan. The bullies openly discussed their harem plan, deciding which girls they would control and what they would force them to do. The protagonist couldn't believe they were dumb enough to speak out loud in an open area. The geeks reported the situation to the class representative, who decided it was time to confront them. Just as the bullies leveled up and gained access to their control abilities, the representative approached them to take action. It was like a fly caught in a spider's web, but a few seconds later, the bullies collapsed to the ground, unable to move. The geeks asked the class representative to use her sealing ability to permanently lock away the bullies' enchantment and puppeteer skills. Once the rest of the camp learned of the bullies' plan for a forced harem, they were expelled. The girls in the camp were disgusted by their intentions, and the bullies fled, both angry and embarrassed. One would think that was the end of the problem, but it wasn't. That same night, the bullies returned, seeking revenge by attacking the camp. The protagonist was surprised, as he didn't think they'd go that far. The bullies attacked the students and set the camp on fire. The remaining camp members blamed the geeks, claiming it was their fault for fighting back and wanting to hold them accountable, as if they themselves had burned down the camp. The class representative tried to intervene, explaining that the geeks weren't to blame for what happened. Some classmates sided with her, but it wasn't enough. The constant judgment from the others became unbearable, and the geeks decided to leave the camp. The protagonist, feeling bad for them, hugged them and offered all his mushrooms to throw a feast. He was so happy with their company that he even decided to spend the next day with them. After all, a bit of company wasn't so bad. After a heartfelt goodbye, the protagonist wished them luck and hoped they wouldn't run into the bullies again. The geeks asked if he wanted to join them as they planned to travel down the river to the city and become adventurers. They assured him that if there was any group he'd be safe with, it would be theirs. The protagonist agreed, recalling the old times when they shared books and conversations, but ultimately declined, urging them to leave. As his friends walked away, the protagonist reflected on how much he'd love to go with them to the city, but knew his poor skills and low stats would only make him a burden. He decided to check on the rest of his classmates, remembering the geeks were worried about the representative. On his way to the river, he encountered a kobold, which bit him. After a few hits with his stick, he managed to defeat it. Sore from the fight, he continued his journey and arrived at the riverbank by nightfall, where he saw the remains of the destroyed camp the geeks had mentioned. The place was deserted, so he assumed the others had moved after the attack. Following a trail crossing the river into the forest, he spotted the 3 popular girls. Nervously, he regretted coming and thought about going back home. As he turned to leave, thinking about fried chicken for dinner, one of the girls saw him and asked him to stop. Without thinking twice, the protagonist bolted, knowing they were the last thing he wanted in his peaceful, solitary life. One of them pleaded with him to stop. Surprised, the protagonist halted, thinking he must have misheard since she would never say, "Please." The girl explained they were looking for Oda's group and asked if he was part of it or if he had seen them. The protagonist thought for a moment and replied that he didn't know Oda's group, only a group of geeks. The girl clarified it was the same group and pressed him for more information. He wondered why they were looking for them and figured they probably wanted the geeks to work for them again. But annoyed, the girl clarified they wanted to apologize. The protagonist was shocked, never expecting to see them apologizing in real life. He told them he doubted they could catch up to the group, but the girls still wanted to try. The protagonist asked if they knew how to get out of the forest alone, if they could fight monsters. The girls hesitated, and the protagonist questioned whether they truly wanted to apologize or were just going to give up. The girls tried to explain it wasn't that simple, but the protagonist pressured them, saying if they weren't serious, telling them where the group was would only bring more problems to his friends. The girls broke down in tears, begging him to teach them how to survive so they could find the geeks and apologize properly. Suddenly, the protagonist's subjugation skill activated. When he checked his stats, he saw that the 3 girls were now listed as his disciples. He couldn't back out now. From that moment on, the girls began following him around like ducklings. The protagonist was terrified of his own ability. The girls acted like zombies, fighting enemies with a cold ruthlessness, and even enjoying extracting magic crystals from them. He was scared of them. He knew that if the class representative saw this, she would scold him, and he admitted that he was never at her level to give orders like she did. He began to wonder how he could cancel the skill. At that moment, the class representative appeared. When she saw him, she was overjoyed, but he was more focused on how to improve the mushroom potion one of the girls had just thrown at him. Frustrated, the representative yelled at him, finally getting his attention. Meanwhile, the bullies were already planning to return to the camp to retrieve the girls. The class representative yells at Haruka until she finally catches his attention. Surprised to see her, Haruka realizes that he doesn't know her name, so he keeps calling her class rep. The girl is irritated because they've known each other since childhood. Soon, 5 other girls arrive, tired from chasing after the representative. Haruka notices that they are the rest of the girls from the class. The class rep asks Haruka what's going on with Shimazaki and her friends. He's unsure how to explain what just happened. Haruka fills her in on everything, including how he subjugated them. The class rep can't believe what she's hearing and tells him that such an ability is meant for monsters. Haruka admits he doesn't know how it happened. It just did. All the girls glare at him coldly, imagining his wicked intentions. Haruka tries to leave and go home, but the girls stop him. The class rep manages to snap Shimazaki out of her strange trance and questions her about what happened, as she doesn't trust Haruka. While they interrogate the girls, Haruka sits down, waiting. Bored, he decides to practice his earth magic to improve his house, but the spell goes wrong and he ends up buried in the ground. The class rep pulls him out, unsure of how he could do that to himself. It turns out the girls explained that Haruka didn't do anything bad to them. In fact, he went looking for them because he was worried something might have happened. Haruka doesn't remember saying or doing anything like that. The girls apologize to him and thank him. With everything resolved, Haruka insists he wants to go home. The girls can't believe he wants to leave them now, and the class rep doesn't understand what he means by home. Haruka explains that he had a lot of free time, so he built a house. The girls are shocked and think it's a great idea. The class rep blows her whistle, starting another meeting, and once again, Haruka is left out of it. Suddenly they ask how many people can fit in his house. Without much interest, he replies that if 6 people fit per tatami mat, maybe around 240 could fit, more if they remove the furniture. The girls are surprised he has furniture. He tells them he also has a kitchen, a lounge, and a bathroom. The class rep asks if he lives in a mansion, adding that they've been living in survival mode since they arrived. The girls make a decision and ask the class rep to proceed with the plan. Embarrassed, the class rep asks Haruka if they could at least spend one night in his house. Haruka loses his mind at the thought of having an entire class of high school girls all to himself. He starts leading them through the forest, using his location ability. The girls don't understand how he can navigate corners and intersections so well. The class rep sarcastically asks if his house has a store too, but Haruka replies that he's considered building a pharmacy. Finally, they arrive at Haruka's house, and this time it looks much better. It's had several upgrades since the last time it was shown, and the girls are astonished by the palace-like home. They cry with happiness. Relieved, they won't have to spend the night in a tent. Haruka shows them where the rooms are, but before he can finish, the girls have already run off to the bathroom, tearing off their clothes. The only one keeping her composure is the class rep, who tells them to control themselves. The girls undress and hop into the bath. Haruka knows that spending so much time in the forest has turned them into savages. At night, it's time to sleep, and Haruka is happy to finally have some alone time. But just then, the class rep enters, thanking him for what he's done for them. She explains that after the bullies left, the rest of the boys also abandoned them, leaving them all alone. Having decent food and a bath lifted their spirits. She also confesses that she feels guilty because, despite being responsible for everyone, she hasn't been able to protect them. Haruka disagrees, pointing out that everyone is still safe. Even so, the class rep insists she hasn't been able to contribute as much as Oda and his friends. Haruka tells her that those geeks were practically raised for the day they'd be transported here, and that in any case, they are the weird ones. The class rep scolds him for saying something so rude, but he explains that he just wanted to show her that she can't compare to them in that aspect. Haruka's words lift her spirits. However, she also realizes that if Haruka can build houses, cook, and defeat monsters, then he's even stranger than the geeks. She thanks him for everything, wishes him good night, and leaves. That night, Haruka struggles to fall asleep, imagining his classmates in pajamas and underwear in his house. The next morning, Haruka wakes up to find a girl in his tent, telling him that breakfast is ready. Haruka wants to stay in bed a little longer, but the girl comes closer, even getting on top of him. Nervous, he tries to change the subject and asks what's for breakfast. She answers, mushrooms and fish. Hearing there's fish, Haruka jumps up, accidentally hitting the girl's head. He rushes out to eat the fish and savors every bite, saying it's been so long since he had one. The girls are surprised since he lives by a river. He tells them he spent days eating mushrooms and watching the fish, but when he tried to catch one, they'd slip away because they were so slimy and slippery. He asks if they have an easy way to catch them. They take him to the river, where one of the girls charges a lightning spell in her hand and throws it into the water, causing several fish to jump out. Haruka is amazed at how effective it is and begs her to do it again. The girl charges her hand with lightning magic again, but this time Haruka approaches and creates a transparent box that captures the spell. He says he's using his packaging magic to wrap and store the lightning magic. He throws the box into the river and finally catches his first fish. Additionally, he gains the lightning magic ability. The girl wonders how he acquired her magic, and the class rep asks Haruka what he's done. He explains that with his packaging magic, he can acquire elemental magic of any type. The class rep realizes that this makes it a pretty powerful technique. Haruka thinks it's due to the combination of his packaging ability and his jack-of-all-trades skill. He's learned that even the weakest abilities have their uses. The class rep is amazed by how strong he is, but he reminds her that he only has leftover abilities and that they got the truly powerful ones. He even admits that he almost peed himself from the overwhelming power he just gained. They sit by the river, and Haruka asks what their plans are. The class rep is considering going to the city, and it makes sense to him since Shimazaki and her friends wanted to hunt down the geeks there. The girls clarify that they don't want to hunt them down, just apologize. The class rep mentions that before they leave, they should probably level up. Haruka agrees, noting that without that, they won't be able to hunt the geeks. Shimazaki and her friends reiterate that they don't want to hunt them down. Haruka agrees with the plan and offers to help them train. The class rep thanks him, but clarifies once more that they're not Hunt Oda and his friends. Haruka finally understands and thinks it's a shame because he wanted to see them fight with their abilities at full power. Everyone gathers in the forest, and before they begin, Haruka wants to know what level the girls are at. They start sharing their levels, and the lowest is 16, which Haruka can't believe, especially since he's still level 7. The girls grow impatient, eager to start training. Haruka realizes they don't really need him, but then he gets an idea. He gives them their first mission, to wipe out all the low-level kobolds. The poor kobolds don't know what they did to deserve this. The girls see that none of the kobolds are above level 10 and know it'll be easy. They prepare to fight, but the kobolds win without any trouble. Haruka calls it pathetic. The girls complain that they didn't mention how fast the kobolds were or that they'd bite. They all gather in Haruka's magic tent to come up with a new plan, and he doesn't understand why they're doing it in his tent. After a few minutes, they emerge, motivated and ready, determined to defeat the kobolds. Haruka is glad to finally have some time to himself, but the same girl who woke him up in the morning remains in the tent. She apologizes and confesses that she tested him because in the last camp, the boys almost caught her, which was very traumatic, and she was worried he might try to take advantage of them too. Haruka realizes these girls have been through a lot. She thanks him for giving them a home, food, and training, promising to wake him up every morning when the fish is ready. Haruka thanks her and nicknames her Fish Girl. The next morning, Fish Girl keeps her promise and brings him fish for breakfast. He hears the other girls leaving the house, motivated and eager to seek revenge on the kobolds, but the class rep stops them, reminding them that they need to train first. The training involves fighting a goblin. The girls battle it and are almost immediately defeated. After a few days of training, the rematch arrives. The kobolds mock them, which angers the girls. Some of them fall asleep before the encounter, and others complain of stomach aches trying to avoid the fight. The more motivated girls face the kobolds, fight as a team, and finally manage to defeat them. The class rep congratulates them, and Haruka realizes he was worried for nothing. The girls shake hands with the kobolds, making amends. Haruka feels relieved, thinking he can finally return to his peaceful, solitary life, but the class rep asks if they can now accompany him to the city. He tells her he never agreed to go with them, but the class rep pleads. The day arrives, and the class rep and the girls are ready to set off, checking to make sure they have everything. Meanwhile, Haruka asks Fish Girl to pack as much as possible in her bag. The class rep says the bag is already full, and Haruka agrees, so he decides to leave her behind. Fish Girl resigns herself to being left, but the class rep tells Haruka he has to bring her along. They all set off together for the city. Haruka warns the class rep that they don't know what they'll encounter on the way, so they need to be careful. In the forest, a boy is being chased by a hooded man. When he catches him, the boy begs for his life, but the man ignores him. The protagonist guides the group through the forest, aware that the bullies are pursuing them. His priority is to keep the girls safe, which means they must leave the forest quickly. At one point, the group comes face to face with a troll. The girls hide behind Haruka, and he asks them to observe his battle skills and learn what they can. The troll tries to hit him, but Haruka dodges and quickly hides behind a tree. He remembers that the geeks told him trolls were resistant to physical attacks but weak to magic. He checks what types of magic he has. Thanks to his gift of packaging, he has acquired a wide variety, though the only element he didn't obtain was fire, which is an evolution of his temperature control. The troll finds him and destroys the tree he's hiding behind, luckily missing Haruka. He quickly moves to the troll's back and strikes it on the head with his stick. The troll falls, defeated, something that surprises Haruka since he thought they were immune to physical attacks. The girls judge him with their eyes, and Haruka reassures them that he'll use magic for the next one, just as the geeks advised. Soon, they encounter another troll. Haruka creates a small fireball and throws it at the troll's face. The troll falls instantly. Haruka hadn't expected such low-level magic to be enough. The girls complain that they couldn't learn anything new, saying that he's too powerful for them to match. That night, they set up camp. The girls eat happily while Haruka sets traps in case enemies attack during the night. Along with his tent, which provides perception and repels enemies, it's enough to keep them safe. Haruka plans the route. He can deploy a map, a derivation of his appraisal ability. Suddenly, the map starts marking an alert. Haruka knows enemies are approaching, but what kind? Silently, he moves toward the signal, avoiding detection. He sees human-like figures and suspects they might be the bullies. The figures approach him and greet him. It's just the dumb jocks. The jocks complain about being called dumb. The class representative overhears from a distance. Haruka asks why they've been following them and accuses them of being perverts, suspecting they're after the girls. They reveal that they were actually looking for him. Haruka, a little awkward, asks if it's something related to the rainbow community. They deny it. Haruka then asks why they're hiding from the girls. Embarrassed, they confess that they don't trust anyone. They ask if he knows there's a scarier skill than puppeteer or enchantment. Haruka remembers that the only worse skill would be plunder. The jocks explain that although their skills caused a lot of fuss, no one mentioned plunder, which worries them because someone might have it and be hiding it. In a somber tone, Haruka asks what they would do if he had that skill. The leader of the jocks admits that it would actually be a relief. Haruka confesses that he doesn't have it, but that he learned subjugation. They tell him that sounds even worse, but since it's in their hands, they're not worried. They know that Haruka prefers to be alone anyway. The leader just wanted to warn Haruka about that skill and asks her to be careful. He also asks Haruka to apologize to the girls on his behalf. They part ways, saying they will go watch out for the bullies. The next day, Haruka tells the girls to get ready to leave. The girls are excited and eager to show off their skills. Haruka finds their enthusiasm strange and suspects they might have mixed some strange mushrooms into their breakfast. The class rep asks to speak to Haruka. She wants to talk about Kakisaki and the other boys. Haruka realizes he is referring to the dumb jocks and tells him that they sent their apologies, but he forgot to mention it last night. she already knows. What he means is something else. She gets more nervous and apologizes to Haruka, but he already knows what is going on and asks if she has looting. She asks him how he knew, as it was supposed to be a secret between the geeks and her. Haruka explains that one look is enough and the jocks are too dumb to notice. She doesn't understand how he can be so calm about it, as looting is a terrible ability. You can steal someone's ability by taking their life. It's obvious to fear the wielder of such a cruel ability. He asks if the geeks were afraid of him, and she realizes that they weren't. Haruka explains that it's because they have nothing to fear. That's why they sealed the bully's abilities but didn't seal hers. They trust that she's in good hands. Haruka knows that it's actually a relief that such an ability is in the hands of the most responsible person in the group. Haruka's words make the representative's eyes fill with tears. Haruka teases her, saying that she's been crying a lot lately. In a cute and flirtatious way, the representative says that it's all her fault. Embarrassed and flustered, Haruka runs off, claiming that he hasn't done anything, but she knows he's done a lot and thanks him for it. After a long walk, the group decides to rest, and Haruka starts offering discounted juice to his companions. One girl says she doesn't have any money but is willing to pay in other ways. Haruka likes the deal, but the representative stops him and asks him to stop charging his friends. They continue their journey, and Haruka finds a nice-looking stream and decides to try something out. He leaves the representative in charge and runs off into the woods before they can stop him. He wraps his body in magic to enhance his physical abilities and run faster. He also adds weight magic to make himself lighter, allowing him to climb trees with a few jumps. He manages to jump high enough to see much of the river and forest, but forgets that he is still in the air and falls, injuring himself badly. Fortunately, his magic wrap protected him enough to keep him alive. The representative is shocked to see him so injured. Haruka explains that he just fell from a great height, and the girl scolds him for not using his company communicator skill. Haruka knows that when you are a loner, you forget how to communicate with others. He tries to dodge the topic by showing her his bowl of berries, suggesting that they can make juice. The morning girl is excited by the idea. The next day, they made great progress. They found a lost girl, played in the river, and Haruka faced several trolls. But after all that, they finally made it out of the forest. The girls rejoice and celebrate, but Haruka knows they need to be more careful now that they are exposed. They try to find the town, but the mountains and hills block the view. Haruka realizes that her walking ability has evolved to walking on air. She decides to try it out and finds that she can step on air. She begins to ascend as if she is climbing an invisible ladder. The representative sees him and asks what he is doing. Haruka says that she just wants to make sure everything is safe. At a good height, she uses her sight and notices that everything seems safe. Suddenly, she sees a small group of scouts surrounded by wolves, the first native Isekai inhabitants they have seen. She reports this to the representative. She asks them what they should do and suggests helping them, but Haruka knows that just because they are being attacked doesn't mean they are good people. She knows that her companions are too trusting, which could be dangerous. The representative begins to organize the girls, sending the fastest ones to the front to try to save the scouts. Haruka tells him that even if they run as fast as they can, they won't make it in time, and that there's no guarantee that the scouts aren't bandits. He suggests that they keep going. The representative stops him and says that if they are bandits, he'll fight them, but he still wants to try to save them. Haruka expected nothing less from his representative, so he tells her that he'll go. He knows that he won't make it by running, not even using his skills like the day before. He decides to try something new. First, he improves his physical form with magic wrapping, adds weight magic to make himself lighter, and finally uses great wind magic to fly, propelling himself with his airwalk. Everything seems to work well, but Haruka finds the class representative clinging to him. He asks her what she's doing there, and she replies that she got caught in his wind magic. Before long, they arrive at the battle with the wolves. The representative warns Haruka to stop, and he says he doesn't think he can, so they crash into the battlefield, knocking out both the wolves and the representative. The men thank Haruka for his help. The leader introduces himself as Ofter, and his partner is named Gatek. Haruka is glad to find out that he can understand the people of this world. They thank him for saving their group. They also explain that the merchants have been attacked by wolves lately, so the Adventurers Guild put a bounty on them. They thought it would be an easy task, but a large green wolf appeared, surprising them, and they couldn't handle it. Haruka knows it will take a while for the other girls to get to them, and the representative is still unconscious, so she takes the opportunity to roast some mushrooms for the adventurers. They all stop to eat and enjoy the mushrooms, which restore strength and stamina, as well as heal their wounds. Haruka can't help but notice that the group includes 2 adults and 3 pretty young girls, and that makes him feel a little jealous. The The representative finally wakes up and sees Haruka going into fighting mode. A while later, the rest of the girls finally catch up to them and are captivated by the elf girl in the group. The group of adventurers takes them to the town called Omui. The girls are enchanted by how beautiful the town is and excitedly run off to explore it. Haruka realizes that they are acting like little girls in a theme park. Everyone celebrates the big win. They have finally made it to the town. Meanwhile, the bullies continue to train and level up. They know they are ready to make their move, but before they go after the girls, they need to unlock their skills. Only someone with the seal skill can unlock them, so they must go after the geeks first. The jocks spying on them overhear their entire plan. The students arrive at the city and start getting to know the locals and the streets. It's a lively place, and Haruka knows it's not the place for a loner. He thinks that now that he brought them there, maybe he can return to his forest, alone. The class rep struggles to keep the girls in line, but it's too much for her. She asks Haruka for help, but he's relaxing with a drink. Seeing his refusal, the class rep blows her whistle, and immediately, the rest of the girls form up. She's trained them well. The rep tells them the plan. First, they'll head to the Adventurers Guild, sell everything they've collected, then register, and finally, they'll sleep at an inn. She's also planning to try to gather information about the geeks. This angers the blonde, who thinks the rep is taking the search too lightly. Haruka steps in and assures her that's not the case. They arrive at the guild, where the members look dangerous and grim as they eye the newcomers. A warrior calls out to Haruka, telling him that the guild leader wants to see him. Haruka agrees, and while he talks to the leader, he asks the rep to handle the registration. Upon entering the office, Haruka is met by a very strong and intimidating man. The leader approaches and thanks him for saving Ofter and his group. It seems they just wanted to meet him and recognize his bravery. Afterwards, Haruka finds the window for selling magic crystals. He walks over to sell what he has. The girl at the counter takes them, saying that she will appraise them and give him a price. Haruka throws a large pile of crystals onto the counter. The girl is surprised, as no one has ever brought so many before, and Haruka mentions that he has more. The girl tells him that it will take some time to appraise them, and asks him to come back tomorrow. The representative finds him and tells him that all the girls have registered. He often sees them and is glad that they did, acknowledging that they are all of a high level. Haruka is also pleased, knowing that they leveled up a lot along the way, and already had powerful skills from the White Room. All the adventurers who initially seemed gloomy now seem friendly, welcoming the girls. It is Haruka's turn to register, and everyone is confident that he will be a great adventurer. At the registration room, they check her stats and inform her that she can't register unless she's at least level 10. Haruka pleads for an exception, but the girl refuses. She adds that if she wants to be a solo adventurer, she needs to be level 20, and will only be respected once she reaches level 30. Haruka knows that her solo skill prevents her from teaming up, and level 20 seems like a far-off goal. The representative watches what's going on, knowing that Haruka is now out of the game, so it's her responsibility to guide all of her companions safely to a shelter. Together, they walk to an inn. The guild helped make the arrangements, and they finally arrive. It's an inn with several rooms that have a romantic atmosphere. A cheerful girl welcomes them. Haruka can't believe that the representative brought them to a love hotel, but the representative replies that she didn't plan it this way. They all go to their rooms to sleep. Inside, the rooms seem much more discreet than outside. All the girls are sleeping peacefully, and Haruka lays down on her bed, admitting that it is very comfortable but that she misses her home in the forest. The blonde girl can't sleep either, wondering where Oda and the rest of the geeks are. The next morning, everyone goes to have breakfast. The representative announces that she is investigated, and it seems that this town is very safe and has many shops. All the girls get excited about that. Haruka does too, knowing that she has nothing to worry about now, and that once she redeems her crystals, she will return home. At the guild, the seller gives Haruka a large bag of money, telling him it's all they have and begging him to please accept it. Haruka replies that he doesn't plan on robbing them. The guild leader interrupts the conversation and says that they still haven't finished evaluating the loot Haruka brought and that they don't have enough funds to pay him. However, he offers to pay him in installments. Haruka gladly accepts. The girls at the counter are relieved to hear this. Haruka receives his first payment of 8 million ere. Haruka knows that the currency is equivalent to his homelands, which means he's now a millionaire. The girl at the counter explains that the payment for the crystals depends on the type of creature they come from. Haruka brought F-rank crystals, the lowest there are, but he brought enough to earn that amount. He was also paid for eliminating the green wolves. Haruka thinks that with this money, he can make a few purchases before heading back to the forest. All the girls are excited about the idea of shopping, often offers to take them to a place he knows they'll like. Haruka thinks he wants to take him to meet girls, and the rep tells him to stop thinking about nonsense. Haruka follows, almost hypnotized, but he's actually taken to an armory. Disappointed, Haruka asks what's so special about this place. Often responds that it specializes in gear for people with abilities like his. Haruka thinks it's a polite way of belittling him. Often insists that they sell quality weapons, even if they don't look like it, and assures him the seller is a good guy, even though he doesn't look it. Haruka begins inspecting the merchandise. Haruka finds several items that catch his eye but doesn't know which one to buy. Then, he sees a necklace with purple pearls. It says it adjusts to 7. Haruka remembers that since his valuation ability reached level 5, his villager set shows the same. Haruka asks the vendor what that means, and the man replies that it refers to the combination of items. With it, he could combine up to 7 items and use all their effects simultaneously. Haruka knows this is very useful, and also that his villager outfit can do the same. This means he can add a lot of effects to his gear, so he's decided to buy a bunch of items. Just then, the rep arrives, blowing her whistle, scolding him for not returning at the scheduled time. Haruka waits longer, wanting to get a mistletoe vine, but something activates, and the mistletoe falls into the item box, combining everything. The seller is furious over his carelessness and wants to charge him for everything that was combined, amounting to over 10 million ire. Everyone begs and explains that he only has 8 million. Haruka suffers as he watches all his money disappear in an instant. The next day, Haruka is still lamenting. They manage to negotiate the debt down to 8 million, but once again, he's broke and didn't get to buy everything he wanted. Haruka wants to leave the city to gather more crystals, but only adventurers with a special permit can leave. He's convinced that city life is not for him. He puts on his cloak, which is now combined with an invisibility cloak, and prepares to leave unnoticed. He walks among the girls, but only the rep notices anything. He manages to slip out of the inn and runs happily, knowing he'll finally return to the forest. He leaps with his air-walking ability, trying to jump over the wall, but some of his companions see him and ask what he's doing. Haruka gets distracted and hits his crotch on the wall. Haruka complains to the 3 girls. Apparently, 2 are from the volleyball team, and 1 is a gymnast. He knows they're the group of sporty girls, but he notices 1 is missing. Then he sees her at a clothing stall. It seems she's the naturist girl who's willing to strip for any reason. The girl finds a cute outfit and is ready to try it on right then and there. Haruka and the sporty girls run to try to stop her. The girl hears them and tells them not to exaggerate since she's still dressed, but she's no longer wearing her skirt, and her shirt is unbuttoned. The girl is a bit saddened that she couldn't try on the new clothes. Haruka realizes he may have overreacted and assures her that what she chose is very cute and will look great on her. This cheers up the naturist girl. Haruka realizes his first escape plan failed. The next day, the girls prepare for their first mission. Haruka asks if he can go, but the annoyed rep forbids him for attempting to escape the day before. Haruka resigns himself to waiting for them to return, but in reality, he's going to carry out his second escape plan. He uses his invisibility cloak again, walks to the exit, slips past the guard effortlessly, and finally manages to leave the city. He runs towards his forest, passing through a ruined village. Haruka knows it wasn't destroyed when they arrived, but doesn't give it much thought. He keeps running and thinks he might have heard the geeks, but only sees a group of goblins. He refuses to stop and investigate. Then, he encounters some thieves robbing a carriage, with a girl's frightened voice coming from inside. Haruka knows this is very Isekai, and can't ignore it. He makes his staff appear, but his desire to return to the forest is stronger. As he's about to continue on his way, one of the thieves attacks him, not wanting to leave any witnesses. Annoyed, Haruka uses his fire magic and attacks them with a large flame burst. He just wants to go back to his forest to be alone. Haruka likes what his wooden staff has become. Now it's much more useful and powerful. He assumes it's because it combined with a fire wand thanks to the mistletoe. The thieves get up, ready to continue the fight. Haruka tries to dissuade them, but it's useless. The thieves attack him. Haruka knocks out 2 of them with some electric attacks. The last one is surprised and assumes that Haruka has some kind of magical job. Embarrassed, the boy tells him that he actually doesn't have any job. The thieves are shocked and check his stats, realizing that he's only level 9. They decide to attack him using their weapon skills, something only level 20s can do. Now, Haruka thinks he might be in trouble. They start attacking Haruka with strange abilities, but Haruka easily dodges them. The thieves keep attacking repeatedly, shouting with all their might. Haruka keeps dodging, and after a few seconds, the thieves collapse to the ground, are very tired. Haruka realizes that these guys were weaker than they seemed. The girl from the carriage, a cute girl named Marielle, thanks him for saving her, but she's unsure if she should. since for a moment he wanted to abandon her. She decides to thank him and asks for his name. Haruka introduces himself half-heartedly. Then, Marielle tells him that she's the daughter of a lord from a city, and asks him to accompany her there. Haruka is unsure about postponing his return to the forest, but Marielle assures him that she will show him her gratitude once they arrive. On the way back, Marielle asks Haruka where he's from. He tells her about the city and complains about how ugly it was and the troubles he had, mentioning that the lord of the place must be as shabby as his city. Marielle starts crying and tells him that the lord is her father. Haruka realizes that the carriage is heading back to where he escaped from and tries to flee again, but Marielle is determined to take him to the city and show him a better side of it. Meanwhile, in the forest, the athletes confront the bullies who are after the girls. Seeing that they are blocking their way, the bully attacks, but someone gets ahead of him and strikes him from behind. If you've reached this point in the video, don't forget to leave the word exquisito in the comments. Thank you very much, and see you in the next video.